Of course. Nada, I would teach you if you were a worm. What is the deal with that? I get a lot of that. What are you guys doing? Teach you if you were a worm. Hey, Abby, how are you doing? Ah, shoot. What's going on, Yvette, Elaine, Tyler, Luke? What's up, man? Let me see. What's going on here? All right. All right. Changing social hierarchies. All right. Hey, Mega, Joa, Nicholas, Sergeant Butter. It's Sam. Nice. Uh, Sergeant Butter. Patrick, Jace, Jonathan, how are you guys doing today? Glad to see that you're here. Bishnu, what's up, man? What's going on? Again, those of you who have not written the DBQ based on belief systems, go ahead and get that taken care of. Man, I busted out about 60 of those yesterday. So please get it taken care of. I mean, how will you know if you don't write it where you actually sit with how we are, how we're progressing? I'm seeing a lot of good writing going on out there, guys. I am not kidding you. I'm very, very pleased with where you're sitting, but that doesn't mean that we can stop. We need to continue writing. Hey, Trinity, how are you doing? And why are you in here? Didn't you do this class last year? So, oh yeah. Elaine? Which DBQ is that? Is that the one based on Portuguese trade? Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah, most definitely. If that's what you want to do, I would gladly take it. Nicholas, your point goal should be around a 6 or a 7. That is our goal to score on the AP exam. Again, I'm just guessing here. I'm thinking a 5 will get that 3 that you need, but that's just a guess. I have no clue. So I would definitely try to get that 7, 6 or 7 there. Wow. Is that Case in here as well? Why are juniors showing up in here? Yeah, Elaine, yeah, go ahead and write the Portuguese trade and send it to my Keller ISD email, and I'll grade it. I don't have a problem, doing that for you. So let's get that taken care of. I appreciate it. What's up, Bavesh? You doing all right today? Is Joa in here? Did I see Joa? Let me look here. I think she is. Maybe, yeah. Not too many, Joa. So don't be freaking out. It'll be short today. So we're just covering a couple of sub units today. I'm just trying to get up unit 4 taken care of. We just think it's cool in here. Wow. Case. Well, I'm glad. Hopefully Smith is doing the same thing and you guys are participating there as well. You're bored? You are bored. Well, I'm sorry that you're bored. Find something to do. Break down some documents or something. All right. Hey, Caden, how are you? Yeah, it is all coming together. All right, about 1 more minute and then we're going to get started here. So, what was the movie we were going to watch for fun? Oh, we were going to watch Lagan, Bavesh. Have you seen that? Love that movie. I think it's on. I think it's on Netflix. So when we're done with all this, and when school is done on the 21st, man, go devote 3 hours of your time to watching Lagan. You guys will love it. Are we going to do another DB? Of course, we're going to do another DBQ for practice of vet. Do you think I'm done with that? Heck no. So, okay, let's get going. Today we're going to be taking a look at changing social hierarchies, and we're going to be taking a look at, of course, and one of the biggest ones that we see, of course, is the changing social hierarchy in Latin America. We're going to see new classes being formed, old classes being replaced by a new class, and things of that nature. So we see this constant change and a continuity here, during this time period of 1450 to 1750. And this is going to wrap up this time period today. And then we're going to move on into, revolutions in Unit 5A, and then, of course, Unit 6. We're going to be dealing with, some other things, imperialism and things like that. So our question today that we're going to try and answer through this is, how were social categories, roles, and practices maintained? How did they remain? Or how did they change from 1450 to 1750? Okay, so in this 300-year period, we're going to see a lot of changes in how people are classified, and also how people maintained their social identity. And we're going to see that many states discriminate based on your class or based on your race. Okay? And one of the places we're going to take a look at first is the Ottoman Empire. We're going to take a look at social classes and minorities in the gunpowder empires. And, we're going to, bounce through this pretty fast here with the gunpowder empires. In the Ottoman Empire, the social aristocracy, the social system was built on the warrior aristocracy. It was a very good thing to be part of this warrior class. And you would get to compete for positions in the bureaucracy with the traditional group of people called the ulama. The ulama were priests and ministers of Islam. And now we have this new class of people coming in to try and take control, or try to become the majority, try to become the most powerful class in the Ottoman Empire. And that, of course, were the Janissaries. All right? They gained power, and that's that picture here to the left. These guys are the Janissaries. And they gained power and prestige, and they tried to mount takeovers, or what we call coup d'etats, over the sultans. And then, as we know, as the sultans become weaker, another group of people called the viziers, they were consultants to the sultans, and they became very, very powerful as well. Because remember, during this time period in the gunpowder empires, and I'm talking the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals, we see the sultans begin to really weaken and deteriorate, and these governments become very, very corrupt, because the people that continue to take over, the hereditary sultans and leaders and emperors, are based on harem politics, one concubine pushing her son as the favorite type of thing, and all sorts of people are trying to influence the emperor and the sultan. And we don't see a lot of very strong sultans, especially after the originals like Mehmed and Isfahan and Shah Jahan and Babur and all those guys. After they kind of go away, the ones that follow over the course of the next couple of centuries really, really are not that weak. And with that weakness comes corruptness in the governments as well. Although these power bases grow, especially in the Ottoman Empire, minorities are treated with tolerance there. Jews and Christians, people of the book, are, treated with tolerance. They're still restricted a little bit on where they could live. They could be taxed, based on the idea that they were, Jewish or that they were Christian. And, they couldn't hold top positions in government. So we do see some, restrictions in the Ottoman Empire when it comes to social classes. They did not discriminate against them, but they really didn't treat them as equals to, the Muslims in this era. Okay, so wives and concubines in these areas, participate in what we call, what I mentioned before, in these harem politics. This lady right here, her name is Roxolana. Roxolana, that's kind of a cool name, and she's a concubine, so I guess the name Roxolana, kind of takes me back to that song of the Police, Roxanne. So we have Roxolana here. She was stolen from her home in the Crimea, which is south of Russia here, and she's sold into slavery into the Ottoman Empire. And she's, Orthodox Christian here, but she is forced to convert to Islam, like many of the people are, and she enters the harem of Suleiman. And then she eventually marries him, has a son who would become the Sultan. And, this is just an example of how a lady goes from being a slave, and it's a lady here, and she is a slave to begin with, but through manipulating and maneuvering, she eventually becomes the Sultan's wife, which is very rare, and her son will eventually succeed Mehmed as the Sultan as well. So here we have a woman who comes from outside of the Ottoman Empire, kidnapped, sold into slavery, put into the harem, has a son for the Sultan, and thus she becomes very, very powerful that way. Merchants and artisans in this time period, in the gunpowder area, form a small middle class in the Ottoman Empire. And then that's followed usually by the slaves and the peasants, which fall on the bottom of this empire. So we see that typical setup. You have nobility, the landed aristocracy, people who own land, and then we fall to the merchants. That growing class of people become the middle class, and then, of course, on the very bottom of this class are the peasants and the slaves. All right? In the Mughal Empire, we see this religious toleration. They're very tolerant of all religions under Akbar. He ended what was called the jizya tax. And this tax was given to those who were not Islam or not Muslim. He ended that. He says, hey, it doesn't matter if you're Christian, if you're Sikh, if you're Jewish, if you're Hindu, you are going to be tolerated the same. And again, this is at that time period of that document that we saw in the DBQ on belief systems here. And one of the things that you guys didn't bring up, which really kind of surprised me, and it kind of makes me sad, and maybe I didn't talk about it enough, was the idea that giving alms to the poor is what is part of the 5 pillars of faith of Islam, man. You bring up that 5 pillars of faith when you're talking about document 2, that gives you outside evidence. Okay, so we have a Hindu prince being weighed, and his weight is going to be the idea of, how many taxes or how much he's going to give back to the poor, helping them out. So if he weighs 100 pounds, then 100 pieces of gold will be given to every poor person or something on that order. And that is them respecting the idea of Hindu belief system and the Muslim belief system. So if you would have brought up as one of the 5 pillars that giving to the poor was a foundational thing that Muhammad brought up that says, hey, we need to help the poor, as religion helps the minorities or helps the poor, that would have given you outside evidence in that DBQ. Now that I say this, of the, let me see how many, the 37 of you that are watching and those who haven't done the DBQ yet, I bet you I will see that outside evidence in several DBQs that I get here, in the next few days. Akbar here was also, he gave land and money to Hindus. Remember, Akbar is Muslim. He built a Catholic church. He supports Sikhism. So he's very, very tolerant of other religions at this time. All right, let's take a look at China here. We're going to take a look at the Manchu power. Now, the Manchus are a not Chinese, okay, but they are in control in the Qing dynasty. The Qing dynasty are Manchus, all right? They are not traditional Chinese, all right? Now, with the Chinese, like the Mongols, they tend to put their own people into very powerful positions into government here. They recruit the Han Chinese, the typical traditional native Chinese, to work under the Manchus. They're definitely not going to put the Manchus or the Han Chinese above the Manchus in Chinese bureaucracy here. So under the Qing at this time, the Manchus will always be, on top. The Han suffered the most under the Qing dynasty here because you always have this conflict between the Qing dynasty and then the former Ming dynasty, and you have the White Lotus Society, the Mings, trying to retake over the Qing. So you have this constant conflict between the Qing and the old Ming dynasty, and the Ming dynasty is never able to grab control again. And like I said, the Han suffered the most under the Manchus. They were forced to braid their hair like the Manchus, like this here. This is what the Ming, typically, how men would braid their hair or have their hairstyle, have this top knot here. But under the Qing dynasty, you all had to braid your hair in this manner. And then, of course, this goes into into the early 20th century to get away from the old ways. The Republic of China said, men should cut their hair in more of a Western style version here. The Qing would carry out massacres against the Han if they didn't conform, and several generals massacred hundreds of thousands of Han Chinese. All right, so under the Qing dynasty, we don't get to see a lot of Han movement here. They are considered a second-class citizen at this point. All right, so let's take a look at European hierarchies here. What kind of social structure existed in Europe at the time of contact? And I'm talking about 1450 here. All right, and we see the monarch, the clergy, the nobles, the peasants. It's very feudalistic here. The nobility is at the top of the class here. Many laws are put in place in Europe to give the nobility special privileges, land and titles, of course. But of course, the leadership wants to maintain their control. They would keep control, and they would create an army to destroy noble fortresses if they felt that the nobles were becoming too powerful. And then, of course, in Russia, we have the boyars, which is the landed class, the people that own the land, followed by the merchants and serfs and peasants. And until the Industrial Revolution in Europe, we don't see the rise of a middle class yet. We see the very beginnings of it, but it's not a full or a very strong class here. We start to see very slow acceptance of Jews in Europe. I mean, they've been there for centuries. They have been, in Germany, they were considered the scapegoat of the Black Plague. They said it's their fault. You were the ones who brought the Black Plague. And then you have the St. Valentine's Day massacre in Germany because they killed hundreds of Jews because they thought the Jews were the ones that brought the plague. I mean, the Jews have been scapegoats in Europe for centuries. But we start to see a little bit of acceptance. And one of the reasons is they have a larger role in banking and commerce. Okay? The Catholic Church did not allow what was called a usury tax. Okay? And what a usury tax basically was interest on a loan. If you took money out of the bank or you took money from some sort of a loan officer, if you were Catholic, they could not charge interest rate. I mean, banks do it all the time now. So the Jewish bankers and the Jewish loan officers are the ones who took control of that. You could be Jewish and you could charge, interest on loans if you needed to be. In the Netherlands, this is where the Jews faced the least discrimination of all in Europe. The Netherlands were very, very tolerant of the Jewish faith. But of course, the Jewish population in Europe began to believe, saying, hey, maybe this is the end of our persecution in Europe. But, as we know, as we got into the 20th century, we see a lot of Jewish persecution there. All right. Now, as we get contact in the New World, as Europeans get into the New World, we see a new political and economic elites begin to form. We see the combination of European settlers and Africans and indigenous people, and this leads to a new social hierarchy. We get to see this social hierarchy is based on race and ancestry here. This is called the casta system in Latin America. We have the peninsulares on the top of the social order. Now, those are the people that were born on the Iberian Peninsula, either in Portugal or in Spain, okay? And then they migrated over to the New World. So they are on top of the social class. And then we fall with the Creoles. They are born in America, but their parents are both of European descent. Now, the Creoles eventually will fight for this top part because the Peninsulares are all going to die, all right? Their mom and dad, their grandma and grandpa, they're going to go away. So this new class of people, the Creoles, are going to continually fight for a hold of power and wealth and political strength in Latin America at this time. And then we see new classes of people based on the mixing of different regions of the world. The mestizo class, European and Native American. The mulattoes, European and Africans. And then at the bottom of that, you see Africans, both free and slave. And then on the very bottom of this, you have the Native American Indians, Aztecs, Mayans, Incans, so on and so forth. At baptism, all right, you were assigned your level of where you were in this order at baptism. You could not move up except in marriage, all right? And that probably didn't happen, a whole lot. I'm not going to say it didn't, but I'm pretty sure there weren't a lot of Creole men or a lot of Creole women who were willing to marry down a lower class here. People of the lower classes typically had to pay higher taxes, all right, and tributes. And of course, as we know, people of the lower classes can't afford that, but we see that all across, we see that all across history where these lower classes continually have to pay these taxes that they can't afford. All right, so that brings us to the end of our changing social hierarchies here. And all I wanted to show you was that we see a lot of continuity take place, but we see a ton of changes. We're always going to have that rich class versus a poor class. That is a continuity across time since we start talking. You'll always have that. But who kind of falls in the middle? Now, that upper class might not be the nobility. It might be a factory owner, okay? So keep that in mind. Who's at the top might change a little bit, and who's at the bottom might change a little bit, but there's always going to be a rich and a poor class here. Okay, and of course, as we know, women do not fall very high in the social class. It is very patriarchal. Women, except in a few instances, get a little bit of power, but for the most part, they are definitely below men when it comes to social class. All right, so take a couple of moments, and then we'll get into the last one, which is shorter than this one, which I think you guys will appreciate on a Wednesday afternoon. All right, now see what. I can answer any questions here. There we go. And okay, so let me see here. Can I live stream at the end of the year? What for, Jesse? Don't be shy. Sing some more. No, you got what you're going to get from me singing. All right? Maybe I'll surprise you someday. It's like those ads we see all over Instagram. I don't even know what that means. Yeah, only 2 PowerPoints today, Joa. How do you like that? I'm respecting your time. Okay? Well, I hope everyone is doing well, and we're all, taking care of business, whether it's for my class or whether it's for another class. And one thing I want to make sure you guys understand here is that I know I have these at 2 o'clock every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And that's for continuity's sake, okay? Before the district came out and said, okay, this is where theater is, this is where math is, this is where English is, this is where social studies is. I wanted to keep mine, consistent. I don't want to change this 2 o'clock thing. So on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to be doing something live, whether it's on a Zoom with a DBQ or something like this. Now, am I requiring you to be here? Absolutely not. All right? If you have to do other things for other classes during this time, by all means, do it. And do not, for whatever reason, tell your teacher that I am requiring you to be here, because that is not the truth. Okay? This is always recorded, and it'll be available on my YouTube Live channel. All right, so make sure you are doing the stuff you need to for other classes, and don't blame me for missing stuff that you need to be at, okay? I don't want to receive those types of emails, which I have, okay? Just letting you know. Can I add 2 more slides? 2 more slides to what, Mega? I don't know why you want me to add 2 more slides. I am not live streaming the movie. Go watch it on Netflix. God, I had a friend who does the same thing that I do, and she she showed a video from like National Public Radio or something. I don't know where she got the video, and for somehow NPR found out about it. And they put her in YouTube prison. She can't stream for like 2 months because she put this video on her live stream from NPR. So I am not doing any of that. So, okay, let's get going. Okay, so we can get out of here today, and then you guys can get on to do what you need to do. All right. So we're going to take a look at continuity and change. What stayed the same? And what changed from 1450 to 1750. And I think this is a great way to end each unit here, because College Board really likes to take a look at what changes and what stays the same. When you get your prompt, it's going to state evaluate the extent, which is basically continuity and change. How far did something change, or how little did it change, and that would be continuity. So let's take a look at how did economic developments from 1450 to 1750 affect social structures over time. All right, and when we talk about social structures here, we're going to be talking about labor systems, and those labor systems are going to be coercive. All right, we're going to get to see new forms of economic systems develop due to the exploitation of these populations and the exploitation of resources throughout the world. All right, so let's take a look at transoceanic travel and trade. And I think this is probably the most significant change in this time period here. All right, you get the integration of the Western Hemisphere, this over here, with the Eastern Hemisphere, so we truly become globally connected. Before 1492, before Columbus, sails over here, this was the known world. All right, and they were all globally connected. And then we get the New World. We get the Americas involved with it, and that's when it really explodes. That's when we just see trade go from like here to way up here. All right, and this change, of course, comes from the Western Europeans wanting to find this new sea route to Asia, which they never really do. Hey, let's sail west to get to Asia. And, you know what happens there, that, it's history. And, of course, they borrow and develop technology that makes ocean travel easier, the astrolabe, the compass, lateen sails, rudders, etc., etc., etc. You've heard me say those words like 1,000 times this year. And then, of course, we get the Columbian Exchange here, the movement of food, people, and diseases. And, of course, this movement of people and culture transforms a lot of different areas, and it transforms religion as well. All right, let's take a look at some economic changes. All right, the integration of the West, the integration of this area over here allowed for maritime empires. When I talk about maritime empires, I'm talking about the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, the British, the Dutch. All right, those are your maritime empires. They established these trading posts all along the coast of Africa, and then eventually into into India. And the Europeans begin to dominate global trade. And there's always someone that has to suffer. And at the expense of this domination, of course, you get the Arabs, the Chinese, and the Indian merchants. Because the Indian Ocean trade, with the introduction of the Europeans, becomes more violent. They introduce warfare into these areas of the world where it hadn't existed before. The Indians and the Muslims and the Chinese all traded basically equally. Now, each one of them wanted to gain a profit. They weren't all like trying to, profit equally, but they worked together. The trade doesn't stop because of the Europeans are there. The trade just really explodes and becomes much bigger, and it becomes more violent, due to the introduction of weapons, and then of course pirates are involved with this. And I have a DBQ that deals with smuggling, and maybe next week I will put that one out there and see what we can do with that one. All right. Also, with economic changes, we have the colonies in the Americas begin to really gain profits for the Europeans. Now, it's different than the Indian Ocean, because the Indian Ocean area, they didn't really set up colonies. They became more trading posts, especially for the Portuguese. But colonies are established in the Americas by the Portuguese, by the Spanish, the English, the Dutch, and the French. And we also see a little bit of the Russians way up here, begin to colonize these areas for trade. We see the development of the idea of that economic system called mercantilism, all right, where you try to profit as much from another country. You sell as much as you can to another country without buying a whole lot from another country. Capitalism begins to occur here. It's way before Adam Smith writes his Wealth of Nations, but we start to see private investors here. And then, of course, you have the integration of silver into the market, and it will become a global currency. So that is a change after 1450. All right. Also with this increase in trading, you get to see new wealth. People become wealthier. And with this wealth, you start to see the funding for the arts increase. And of course, this is at the stages of, the late Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution. Countries are willing to pay money for people to invent things or create things or build things here. The problem with this wealth, there's so much money on the market, we see inflation beginning to rise. And again, inflation is the idea that your money is not worth as much as it once was, because there is so much, out on the market there. So again, new wealth continues, or I should say wealth continues, but people who are wealthy begin to replace that older noble class. We start to see merchants become wealthier, conquistadors become wealthier here. So we start to see that change. Let me see, we are almost done. All right. And due to agricultural plantation systems, we see this need for new labor systems in the Americas. They need this coercive labor, this forced labor was needed. First of all, in the Americas, you get the encomienda and the mitas systems. The encomienda is more in Mexico and Central America, and then the mitas system is located in the old Incan area of South America, and indentured servitude in North America. But we see those three systems not really help a whole lot because they're more expensive. So what the Europeans do, they say, hey, let's just tap into this African slave trade, and let's bring Africans over to the New World to work in these labor fields and on these plantation systems. So in the Americas, we see this change of new class systems developing based on race and skin color. And also due to this, we see classes change in in Africa, the ratio between men and women begin to change in Africa because the majority of the slaves taken to the New World are men. So women become more important in the cultures, or take on a more important role, I should say, in those African cultures, and we start to see the rise of women leaders for a time being in Africa. All right, so guys, that basically ends it for today. I hope you really got into this continuity and change. This is what College Board will probably test us over. How do things stay the same? How do things change? Okay, and that's something that you always have to keep in mind when you take a look at prompts. Before we go, one other thing I want to bring up to make sure that we are all on the same page. And again, this goes for, I know I've got some Haltom kids in here as well, and you might want to do this or contact your teacher about this. Before test day, all right, I need all of you to get into your College Board account and change your personal email address, change the email address that you have in College Board to a personal email address. Do not use the Keller ISD email address. And there's a couple of reasons for that. For some reason, there is a problem. Some people are getting emails from College Board, other people are not. College Board saying it's not because it's a Keller ISD email, but we're not going to take that chance. We want you to change that email in College Board to a personal email. Now, we're not the only school district that's having problems with this. Everyone is having problems with this. All right? So make sure your College Board profile is also associated with Fossil Ridge. And of course, the school code is right there. Take a picture of it, or you can go back and look at this. That's a very important number that you need to have, all right? And I know I sent out an email to some of you, a couple of weeks ago, making sure that you would change that, all right? So make sure that you're all accessing College Board before test day, long before test day, okay? Because we don't want to deal with those types of issues. I can't log into my College Board account on test day because there's nothing I can do at that point, okay? So keep that in mind, and as more information rolls out about the AP exam, which we should see some, I don't know if we'll see any more this week, but I think next week there should be something new that's rolling out that I'll make sure I pass along to you guys. Okay, that wraps it up for me today. Again, for those of you who haven't written, make sure that you're getting that all taken care of, and get me those DBQs sent. All right, you guys, peace out, stay safe, stay sane.